The Weight of Greed, The Fall of the Sampoong Department Store, Prologue, The Miracle and the Mirage. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, South Korea was riding the crest of an economic tsunami known as the Miracle on the Han River. The nation had transformed itself from a war-torn, impoverished agrarian society into an industrial titan in just a few decades. The skyline of Seoul was a chaotic, beautiful mess of cranes and steel reaching higher into the sky every single day. The watchword of the era was speed. Build it fast, build it big, and show the world what the new Korea could do. In the affluent Sochogu district of Seoul, a monument to this newfound wealth opened its doors in 1989, the Sampoong Department Store. Painted in an eye-catching, vibrant pink, the building was a capitalist palace. It featured a massive glass atrium, an art gallery, luxury imported boutiques, and a fleet of high-end restaurants. It catered to the newly minted elite of Seoul. Every day, an estimated 40,000 shoppers and employees walked across its polished marble floors. It was a place to see and be seen, a symbol of South Korea's arrival on the global stage. But the pink facade was a beautiful illusion. The thousands of people who browsed the jewelry counters and dined under the crystal chandeliers had no idea that the ground beneath their feet and the roof above their heads were fundamentally, fatally flawed. The Sampoong Department Store was a house of cards, built on a foundation of unbridled corporate hubris. Chapter I, The Original Sin. The story of the disaster begins not with a crack in the concrete, but with a sudden change of mind by one powerful man, Lee Jun, the chairman of the Sampoong Group. Originally, the land was purchased to build a standard, 4-story residential apartment complex. The blueprints were drawn up, the foundations were laid, and the original contractors, Woosung Construction, began their work. However, mid-construction, Lee Jun realized that the rapidly gentrifying neighborhood of Seoul offered a much more lucrative opportunity. He didn't want a quiet apartment block, he wanted the most luxurious department store in the country. He ordered Woosung Construction to completely change the blueprints. He demanded that they install heavy escalators, remove structural support walls, and alter the floor plans to create wide, open retail spaces. The engineers at Woosung looked at the new demands and flatly refused. They warned Lee Jun that the foundation and the structural design were meant for an apartment building, not a massive commercial retail space. Removing support walls to create open floors would compromise the integrity of the entire structure. Lee Jun's response was swift and ruthless. He fired Woosung Construction on the spot. He then hired his own company, Sampoong Construction, to finish the job. If the established engineers would not build his vision, he would find people who would simply follow orders. The die was cast. Chapter 2, Slicing the Bones. To understand why Sampoong fell, one must understand how it was built. The building utilized a technique known as flat slab construction. In a traditional building, massive horizontal beams run between the vertical columns, supporting the weight of the floor above. In flat slab construction, there are no crossbeams. The concrete floor slab rests directly on the vertical columns. This method requires two critical things to work safely. The columns must be incredibly thick, and there must be steel reinforcing bars, rebar, intricately woven into the concrete where the column meets the ceiling, acting like a net to distribute the weight. Lee Jun, however, wanted the interior of his department store to look sleek, elegant, and spacious. Thick columns were an eyesore. They blocked the view of the luxury display windows and took up valuable retail space. Furthermore, to fit the massive escalators he demanded, the original columns simply took up too much room. He gave the order to shrink the bones of the building. The original blueprints called for the structural columns to be 80 centimeters, 31 inches in diameter. Sampoong Construction, under Lee Jun's orders, shaved them down to just 60 centimeters, 24 inches. To make matters worse, they reduced the amount of steel rebar inside the columns. Instead of the required 16 steel reinforcing bars, they used only 8. The columns were not only significantly thinner, but they were also hollowed out of their internal strength. The crucial steel netting that was supposed to distribute the weight of the floor slabs was drastically reduced, creating a terrifying vulnerability known in engineering as punching shear. Punching shear occurs when a thin column simply punches through a heavy ceiling slab like a pencil poking through a sheet of paper. The building was standing, but its skeletal system had been starved. Chapter 3, The Fatal Crown. If thinning the columns was the building's original sin, the addition of the 5th floor was its death sentence. The original zoning permits only allowed for a 4-story building. But as construction neared completion, Lee Jun arbitrarily decided he wanted a fifth floor. Initially, this floor was intended to be a roller skating rink, a relatively lightweight attraction. But at the last minute, the plans changed again. The fifth floor would become a complex of traditional Korean restaurants. This seemingly simple change in tenant type was a structural nightmare. Traditional Korean restaurants feature a unique dining style where patrons sit on the floor. To accommodate this, the floors must be heated, a system known as ondol. Installing ondol requires laying a thick network of hot water pipes and encasing them in a massive layer of solid concrete. This single decision added thousands of tons of completely uncalculated, unplanned weight to the top of a building whose support columns had already been dangerously thinned. But the final, fatal blow was yet to come. A massive luxury department store requires a massive climate control system. To cool the gigantic glass atrium and the 5 sprawling floors, engineers purchased 3 enormous air conditioning cooling towers. Each of these metal behemoths weighed 15 metric tons when filled with water. There was nowhere to put them but on the roof. The total weight of the 3 units was 45 tons, 4 times the weight limit that the roof had been designed to hold. Chapter 4. The Dragging of the Behemoths. In 1993, 2 years before the tragedy, the neighbors in the adjacent apartment buildings began to complain about the noise from the 3 massive AC units on the roof. To appease the wealthy residents, Lee Jun ordered the 3 cooling towers to be moved from the east side of the roof to the west side. Normally, moving 45 tons of machinery requires hiring a heavy-duty crane to lift the units into the air and gently place them in their new location. But hiring a crane was expensive. Lee Jun, ever obsessed with cutting costs, refused. Instead, he ordered his workers to put the massive units on rollers and literally drag them across the roof of the building. As the workers dragged the 15-ton metal giants across the concrete, the sheer weight and friction tore into the roof. The roof slab cracked wide open, but the true damage was happening just beneath the surface. Directly underneath the path of the dragged AC units was a specific structural support pillar known as Column 5E. As the massive weights were dragged over it, the immense stress caused Column 5E to fracture deeply. The concrete cracked, the reduced steel rebar buckled, and the vital connection between the column and the 5th floor was mortally wounded. Once the AC units were settled in their new location, directly over Column 5E, they were turned on. Every time the air conditioning engaged, the massive fan sent violent vibrations down through the compromised column and into the fragile concrete floor. For 2 years, the vibrations acted like a jackhammer, slowly widening the cracks, grinding the concrete to dust, and preparing the building for its inevitable end. Chapter V. The Whispers of a Dying Building. Buildings rarely fall without warning, they usually scream before they die. By April 1995, the Sampoong Department Store was crying out for help. Massive cracks began to appear in the ceiling of the 5th floor, specifically in the restaurant area directly beneath the heavy AC units. Management's response was not to call structural engineers, but to patch the cracks with cheap plaster and paint over them. By June, the situation had become impossible to ignore. A large crack, wide enough to fit a hand inside, split the floor of one of the restaurants. The ceiling began to sag visibly, dropping several inches. Employees reported hearing loud, terrifying popping sounds echoing through the walls, the sound of steel rebar snapping under impossible tension. The vibration from the air conditioners was so violent that the water in the restaurant fish tank sloshed over the sides. On the morning of June 29, 1995, the day of the collapse, the building's manager finally called in a structural engineering consultant. The consultant took one look at the sagging 5th floor ceiling and the massive cracks radiating from Column 5E and realized the building was in immediate peril. He strongly recommended that the entire building be evacuated immediately. Lee Jun convened an emergency meeting with his executives. They had a choice: evacuate the building, save thousands of lives, but lose a day's worth of lucrative sales and face a public relations disaster, or keep the doors open and hope the building held together until closing time. The decision was pure, unadulterated greed. They ordered the 5th floor to be closed off to the public, claiming renovations. They turned off the heavy air conditioning units on the roof to stop the vibrations, but they left the rest of the department store open. In a chilling display of priorities, the executives ordered their staff to carefully move the expensive jewelry and designer merchandise out of the most dangerous zones, prioritizing luxury goods over human lives. As the afternoon wore on, Lee Jun and the top executives quietly left the building, saving themselves while leaving 40,000 people inside a dying structure. Chapter V6, 5552 p.m. Without the air conditioning running on a hot, humid Seoul afternoon, the inside of the department store became sweltering. Shoppers complained, but the aisles remained packed. At 5:30 p.m., the ceiling of the fourth floor began to visibly sink. Workers frantically tried to prop it up with wooden beams, a futile gesture against thousands of tons of concrete. At 5:05 p.m., a loud, thunderous crack echoed through the entire building. Alarms finally began to wail, and an announcement was made to evacuate, but it was far too late. At 5:52 p.m., the Sampoong Department Store gave up. High up on the fifth floor, the mortally wounded Column 5E finally succumbed to punching shear. It punched cleanly through the fifth floor slab. With the support gone, the immensely heavy, heated concrete floor of the restaurants plummeted downward, crashing into the fourth floor. The fourth floor could not withstand the impact of the falling fifth floor. It immediately gave way, dropping onto the third. This triggered a catastrophic vertical chain reaction known as a pancake collapse. In less than 20 seconds, the entire south wing of the 5-story vibrant pink department store telescoped into itself. The colossal slabs of flat concrete fell one on top of the other, flattening everything and everyone between them until they slammed into the underground parking garage. A massive, choking cloud of gray dust and debris erupted into the sky, completely obscuring the Seoul district. When the dust finally settled, where the pride of Seoul had stood just moments before, there was only a 65-foot deep crater filled with twisted steel, shattered concrete, and crushed pink marble. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. The aftermath of the Sampoong collapse was a scene of apocalyptic horror. Over the next several weeks, rescue teams, soldiers, and volunteers clawed through the rubble. The entire nation watched on live television, praying for miracles. There were a few incredible tales of survival, including a 19-year-old girl pulled from the wreckage after surviving for 17 days by drinking rainwater. But mostly, the excavation yielded only tragedy. The final death toll was staggering. 502 people were killed and over 900 were severely injured. It was, at the time, the deadliest modern building collapse in history, prior to the September 11 attacks. The subsequent investigation laid bare the shocking extent of the corruption and negligence. It was revealed that Lee Jun had routinely bribed city officials to look the other way during construction inspections. The thinning of the columns, the illegal fifth floor, the dragged air conditioning units. Every single safeguard had been compromised for profit. Lee Jun was arrested and put on trial. During his testimony, he showed remarkably little remorse, famously stating, "When a building collapses, the money collapses too. My company has suffered the greatest financial loss." The public outrage was palpable. He was convicted of criminal negligence and sentenced to 10.5 years in prison, later reduced to 7.5 on appeal. He died in 2003, shortly after his release. Epilogue. The Scars of Seoul. The Sampoong disaster profoundly changed South Korea. It forced a brutal national reckoning about the dark side of rapid economic expansion. The government initiated massive reviews of all public buildings across the country. The results were terrifying. Only 1 in 50 buildings was found to be entirely safe, while 4 out of 5 required massive structural renovations. Strict new building codes were enforced, and corruption in the construction sector was heavily cracked down upon. Today, where the Sampoong Department Store once stood, a high-rise luxury apartment complex called the Accra Vista now reaches into the sky. A few miles away, in Yongjai Citizens Forest, a solemn memorial park honors the victims. The story of the Sampoong Department Store remains one of modern history's most tragic lessons in civil engineering. It serves as a permanent, chilling reminder that concrete and steel do not obey the laws of wealth or ambition, they obey only the laws of physics. When the pursuit of profit thins the columns and ignores the weight of reality, the collapse is never a matter of if, but only a matter of when.